Hi, I'm Petre Popescu, and let me show you a very interesting exception and how you can fix it. In this exception, you will get a null pointer exception just by using an enum. This line here will throw an exception. So let's have a simple example. You are building a website or a platform, and you want to have user management where each user has a role. You have different administrator levels, and you have normal users. You store all this information in the database, and in your entity, you have a field which is of type enumerated, and you store one of these enums in the field. This gets persisted to the database, and everything works exceptionally well. However, the platform grows and grows and grows, and more user roles are added. And you think to yourself, well, this enum starts to get really big. How can I make it so that our code is much more easy to read and easier to understand? And you think to yourself, okay, let's split this big enum in two or three or maybe even more enums that all get mapped to the same field. This way you keep backwards compatibility and you don't have to do complex database migrations. So you create this interface. You have user roles interface, and you have an admin enum that implements this interface and a user role enum that implements this interface. And in your entity, you just have a variable of type user role interface. Everything works as intended. You still have to do some mapping between the two and a factory to determine how to map from a string to the enum, but that's not a problem. Everything works as intended. Later on, you want to add a functionality so that some user roles can add other users. And you want to make it very easy to identify what roles can add users and what roles can't. So you have in your interface a method can add user, which by default is false. And uh, in your enums, you have a parameter for the constructor where you specify if that role can add user. Super user, for example, can add a user. An administrator cannot. Region manager can add a user. And similar for normal roles. Sales can't, branch lead can add a new user, and support desk cannot. Again, everything works as intended. Now, for some reason, you need to have a set of all user roles that can add users. And you do this simple string concatenation, you filter, and then you collect the values to the set. And now let me show you what's happening. Here in our main class, you have a system out print line. So you just print to the console, admin user roles dot administrator. You expect that since this is an enum constant, everything works and you just get in the console administrator. Let's run the code and see what happens. Now, after the code was executed, you get something very interesting. You get a null pointer exception. Let's see where. We click here and we see that the null pointer exception is at our enum. I specifically didn't use Lombok, didn't use any code generator. It's just pure Java with no dependencies. Now, if we go further in the stack trace, and click here, we'll see that the actual null pointer exception happened when admin user roles enum dot values was called. Let's put a breakpoint here. And now let's run the program again in debug mode. The program stopped here, and let's execute just this line and see what happens. Evaluate expression, and we see null pointer exception. Want to make things even more interesting? Let's change it to user role enum.values. And for this, everything works as intended. So what is actually happening? I'm not 100% sure, but what I think is happening is that Java wants to instantiate this interface and everything that is in it. So it has to instantiate this set. In order to do so, it has to have all the admin user role values and user role enum values. And in order to obtain this, it has to instantiate this enum, which implements our user role interface. And it tries to instantiate this interface first. It doesn't go in an infinite loop. It's smarter than that, but can't properly instantiate it. As I said, I'm not 100% sure, mostly because admin user roles can be instantiated, but user roles enum can. What is more interesting is this. Let's change this to user to something from user roles enum, let's say branch lead, and run the program again. Now we execute again this method in debug with valid expression, and we see that now the admin roles enum got properly instantiated. However, user roles enum gets the null pointer exception. So whatever is first printed is causing the problem. Even more interesting is that let's change this. Let's first get the size of our set and execute the program. And now, as you can see, everything works as intended. So what I think is happening is that there is a race condition. There's a race condition somewhere in the way Java instantiates all the variables from an enum and from that interface, from user roles interface. The fix is to actually move this outside. So let's make our main class as it was. Again, executing it will throw a null pointer exception. And let's extract this somewhere else. Let's create a new class. Let's name it constant. And let's have it here and make it public static final. And in our main class, instead of using user roles interface, we use constant because this is where our our set currently is. And now if we run our code, we'll see that everything works. So to recap, if you have one or more enums, one or more enumerations that implement one interface, never use values from those enumerations inside the interface. This can cause problems. This can cause maybe some race condition. I'm not entirely sure what is actually happening. And the problem can be really, really hard to identify and maybe won't even happen right away. Maybe this problem can happen 2-3 months down the line after the change was made. I hope everything is more clear now. And I hope this will be very interesting and that you learned something from it. Hope to see you in my future videos. Bye.